Well, Blade is the gift that just keeps on giving. Always something to talk about with Blade. None of those things are ever the movie because we don't have one of those, despite the fact that it's now been 7 years. Yes, 7 years since Kevin Feige stood on a stage and said, look, everybody, two-time Academy Award winner Mahershala Ali is going to be our Blade. And here we are in 2026, not talking about Blade 3. We still haven't got the first Blade movie. And of course, we speculated a lot about like whether this thing was going to be dead and whether or not it was ever going to happen or anything like that. Well, if you're one of those people who kind of believe that the Blade project, at least the one with Mahershala Ali, is dead, this might be the best piece of evidence you've had so far. As in a new interview, Kevin Feige has said he feels like a gigantic loser and failure over not being able to get Mahershala Ali's Blade off the ground. I'm going to see if I can scroll down here. There it is. I'm feeling like a gigantic loser and a failure that we didn't get off the ground with Mahershala. Feige said on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast that he never got it off the ground. Now, I do want to point out that he did not say, I feel like a loser that we never got it off the ground and we never will. Like he didn't say that. But when you say, I feel like a loser and a failure that we didn't get it off the ground, that sounds to me like this is past tense. That sounds to me like they have now thrown in the towel. Again, let me be very clear. Kevin Feige did not say explicitly, it ain't ever happening, folks. But he did say, I feel like a gigantic loser and a failure that we didn't get it off the ground with Mahershala. It sounds like that's done. It sounds like it's done. And if it is done, number one, I'm glad that Feige is actually saying something public about it and not leaving all of us to wonder, although he could be a little bit more specific. But Rob, in the getting close, we're coming close to 20 years that the MCU's been around.
Yep.
The only real failed project they ever had, like Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy had 5 every 2 months. But the only failed project Marvel really had was the original Ant-Man one that Edgar Wright was going to direct. That's really the only one that was a solid in concrete, this is happening, and then it wasn't. In almost 20 years, that's been the only one.
And that might have even predated the MCU.
It did, and that's why because the MCU had moved on in tone and scope.
Yeah.
And they'd gone off in different directions, and like the movie Edgar Wright wanted to make was no longer fitting with the MCU, and so Edgar Wright and Kevin Feige couldn't come to an agreement, and Edgar Wright walked, and it's all good. I love Edgar Wright, but we ended up getting a great Ant-Man movie anyway, so that's fine. But Rob, this is, as successful as Kevin Feige's been, the more successful you are, the bigger each misstep feels. Like when you're the Toronto Maple Leafs and you lose all the time, losing still hurts. Whatever, we lost. You're used to it. But when you're Kevin Feige and Marvel, like this is like the first real big, I think as a producer, this is the first really big blemish. And again, it happens to all studios. It happens to all studio heads. Like I said, under Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm had like 8 of these a year. But this is the first really big public. The MCU wasn't even really going when the Edgar Wright thing had happened. How big of a deal do you think this is for Kevin Feige? And do you think eventually we do get a Blade movie? And do you feel that the Mahershala Ali one is now officially done, or do you think there's still some wiggle room there?
Well, the lack of success with this project has fascinated me because we know, Ruth Carter was deep into designing costumes, and we know that it had a period piece element that was set in the 1920s. Marvel graciously allowed Ruth to repurpose some of that stuff and use it for Sinners. And we know that we heard the voice of Mahershala Ali at the end of Eternals. Yeah. His voice when Kit was getting the sword or the Necro Blade or whatever. And so they were deep into production. Obviously there was a script, there was money
pre-production,
being spent. Pre-production. But the money tap was flowing on this project. I still believe They haven't ever really revisited the Werewolf by Night arena, which is too bad. And kind of Moon Knight would have existed in the same space, perhaps, as Blade. I think that it was more of a Universal problem, not the studio, but the Marvel universe that became an issue. Because, with Blade, it's not just like one guy fighting one vampire. If you looked at the first 3 Blade movies, or the New Line Blade movies, there was a whole secret society of vampires that had existed in the world. And I think that, and he was a daywalker, so he was a hybrid. And that means there's a lot of mythology that they would have to deal with. Like, where's this been for all this time? And I think that, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think that might have ultimately been what torpedoed the whole thing. They could never get a successful script that incorporated the supernatural into the MCU in a way that made a movie about Blade viable. And because otherwise, why not strip it down? You could change it and say that, hey, there's one. The X-Men took on Dracula in an annual once, and it's like in an actual Marvel comic. So depending on what kind of a movie you could make, or what kind of a mythology you wanted to add, you could have made it a little smaller or contained it. I think that's what a period piece would have been interesting, because to see the origins of whatever vampirism that exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I think it's weird because everyone loves vampire movies, and if you look at the template, I think like the first half of the first Blade is really good, and it holds up. Sure. Is it really 90s? Yes. But there's something about the way, the bravado that Wesley Snipes played that character. And the fact that I keep going back to the fact that, John, they did bring Blade back in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
And it's so weird to me that you could even say, like, when they're writing cinema history, the fact that Wesley Snipes' Blade comes back and has his own cool hot toy is amazing. And they couldn't get Mahershala Ali in there? It's kind of weird. It's bizarre to me that they could never make that work. With a guy, Mahershala Ali is such a great actor.
Oh, he would have been
so
great. He would have been great in the role. I've never, you and I've always disagreed on this. I've never thought for them the issue is we just can't crack the idea how to make vampires in here. Look, they could make sorceresses and witches and mutants and mummies and aliens and these god aliens that created the universe. They could do and Asgard, and if they could do all that, vampires shouldn't be that big of a stretch. So clearly there was some kind of hitch that they could never get over. And then they changed, like they went from, it was going to be a period piece, and then Kevin Feige said they changed direction to making a more modern thing. So ultimately at the end of the day, Kevin Feige, maybe when he's 70, he'll write a memoir, and maybe in one of the chapters will be, here's what went wrong with Blade. And then we'll know for sure. But it sucks that it looks like we're not going to get the Mahershala Ali version of it. Guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? Kevin Feige is now saying he feels terrible that they were never able to get the Mahershala Blade off the ground. It sounds to me like that means it's a done deal now, but I don't know. Maybe you think there's still some hope for it. Whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.